Hi, welcome back to Deep Images. I am Henry Covert, your host. I'm here with CF Roberts, my amazing co-host, and show veterans Justin Cotton and Briggy Williams. And returning with us, to us after a year is Francis Chu, who was a standout in our last round of Halloween in 2023. We did several sessions with this nice young lady. So I'm gonna let Francis just tell you a little bit about yourself if you haven't herself if you haven't been with the channel long, uh, just to kind of catch you up to speed, and then we're gonna introduce our next topic.
Hey, I'm Francis Chu. I teach horror at the New School in New York City. I am the author of the Routledge Guidebook to Pain's Rights of Man, and right now I am working on reading the Gothic. It's focused on Matthew Lewis's Monk. It's a really crazy novel from 1797 with rape, incest, vindication of women, um, and anti-Catholic sentiment. It is the craziest work from 1797.
I'm a big fan of most of those, if not all those things. Well, incest is I'm kind of neutral on,
Yeah.
and rape I'm against, but those last two you mentioned I'm a big fan of. Empowerment of women and anti-clericism, yeah. But so we're back to vampires. So we're gonna let Mr. Roberts lead us off with his first selection here in vampires.
Okay. All right. So when I found out we were doing vampires, there was one I decided absolutely needed some recognition, some attention, and whatnot. And it is one from 1982, and it is called The Black Room. Now, we caught this a few years ago, and we were pretty blown away by it, and so I had to go rewatch it. And this is there are few recognizable cast members. It was directed by a guy named Eli Kenner, is an Israeli director. Um, the two the two characters or the two actors I can tell you definitively. There is a performer named Cassandra Gava who plays one of our two-person villain crew, and she was primarily known as a model, I think. In fact, probably the most famous thing I think she did was she was the cover model on a Jefferson Starship album, sorry, called Spitfire,
Oh wow.
and that cover, a big poster of that cover appears prominently in the film. So
Oh,
I
okay.
guess they're really looking to sell the fact that they got her.
Cross promotion.
Um, there's also a pretty early performance by one Linnea Quigley, who
Mm,
comes in about the last, I'd say 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of the film, and she plays a babysitter. And,
mm.
deleterious things happen to her. But the story involves this couple, this married couple, Larry and Robin. And Larry is kind of a serial philanderer who kind of covers up the fact that he's, well, I'll get along to that. He finds an ad in the paper uh, advertising for a room for rent that's pretty cheap up in the Hollywood Hills, and it's a very fancy, well decorated room up in this big mansion. And this pair of this brother sister act named Jason and Bridget are renting this room out, and basically it's there for your exotic trysts and whatnot. And so he starts bringing along some strange up there to his little black room for for some sex and whatever. And
Whatever.
they just we'll have this college student kind of hanging around, wanting to hook up with him, or he'll rent a hooker at one point, and
Hope he gives her back in the condition he found her.
yeah. Well, unfortunately, it ends up not really being up to him, but we'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
So he goes up there and he has these little sessions with these various women, and his wife Robin. They don't seem to be have anything short of anything less than desire between them, but they've got a couple of kids who are reaching the age where they're at their most annoying, and they tend to kind of get, I don't know, I call it kidus interruptus a lot, and I mean not since the baby in Eraserhead, I think, have I seen this much children cock blocking. But
That was a high maintenance child with special needs, though.
yeah, these kids' needs aren't very special. They're just kind of annoying.
Gotcha. Like most
Um,
kids. Many kids. Sorry.
but so Larry begins kind of spinning these tales to his wife about this black room where he has all these meetups with these women and all these affairs and everything, and he just plays it around like he's just telling fantasies, to enhance the relationship and whatnot. He is actually going up to this place in the Hollywood Hills and doing this,
Okay.
but she is just of the impression that he's kind of spicing things up and telling her stories to turn him on, none of which really go anywhere because, like I said before, kidus interruptus. So eventually, what you find out is that Jason and Bridget, his landlord and landlady, Jason is actually suffering from a rare blood disease
Yikes.
and is very weak and just needs transfusions all the time.
Mm.
And what you find out is that a lot of the women that Larry brings up there kind of end up hanging around and kind of end up becoming blood donors, whether they want to or not. And when I say blood donors, I mean they get drugged and laid on a table and literally have all the blood pumped out of them and into Jason. So
He really does have a disease. He's not a vampire, supernatural vampire, or is he? Or
well,
you
that's
probably
that's
get into
always a
that.
good question. I mean, this is one movie that takes lore and kind of throws it out the window. They're perfectly fine walking around in the daylight, and but Bridget, who is very dedicated to her brother and helping to preserve her brother, continually drugs these women. And I think at one point, one of Larry's partners brings her boyfriend up for a trio, and they have a little threesome, and then both she and the boyfriend end up being victims of this pair.
Oh goodness.
And
Now is she
it
just
gets
his assistant in this endeavor, or is she also a blood drinker?
she doesn't appear to be, but I don't know, she acting is kind of like the, I don't know, proxy for Renfield, but
A familiar. Is
yeah,
that what they call it?
a familiar, or I don't know, she may as well be like the co-vampire, given how much work she's doing as far as draining these people of their blood. And they start seeing Larry as being like kind of like, just the kind of like the I guess the Judas goat that kind of brings all the victims to the slaughterhouse. And they keep using him for that. Eventually, Robin, his wife, picks up this little the newspaper ad, which is crumpled and lying in the car, and realizes, oh God, this black room is real.
Hmm.
And so she goes up there and says, I want to see what happens here. I want to see, I'm Larry's wife. I want to see what he's doing. And so she gets in the little voyeur mirror, the little one-way mirror, and watches the whole thing, becomes very upset, gets kind of sick, and ends up and Jason cajoles her into well, why don't you make this your game as well?
Oh
Why
my.
don't you get some partners and bring them up here, and maybe
Uh,
you can be doing this. And so they basically kind of pit them both against each other with back and forth voyeurism until they're both pulled into this thing. And I think Bridget, the sister, by this point, has developed kind of an attachment to Larry and really wants to keep him. But, Jason's whole thing is, everybody's negligible. It's all about giving me the blood. And
vampires are very selfish.
yes. And eventually, the two of them end up, Larry and Robin end up handcuffed in the black room, handcuffed and drugged in the black room. And at that point, they send somebody to go to the house and pick up the kids and their babysitter, played by Linnea Quigley, and drag them up to the house. I thought, okay, so we can drain these two of blood too, just like we'll have we'll have the children, I mean, what could be more youthful than that? Just call the latest Pizza Gator in to look at this. It's like literally, it's like, okay, so you're getting high on the adrenochrome or whatever.
Mhm.
But so they've got that setup going. The kids are captive. The babysitter is captive. Uh, Larry and Robin eventually get out of it and end up kind of busting out and rescuing the kids, rescuing the babysitter, um, massacring,
Okay.
huh? Massacring both Bridget and Jason as they're trying to stop them, and wounding them quite badly. Wounding them, I think Bridget ends up with a clothes hanger through her neck, and so they're dead in a fairly bloody way. These guys escape, and they're just like, oh, thank God they're dead. But are they really? At which point you see the two of them in the house just getting up and staggering around with their various wounds. And they don't look well, and they don't like they're doing terribly well, but they're shambling around. And Robin speculates to Larry, man, do you really think they're dead? I mean, these seem like the kind of really bad, evil people that never ever die. And you just see the two of them staggering around the house. And I guess basically in the end, it's kind of left up to you. Okay, so are these according to Hoyle vampires, or are they just insane, durable hemoglobin addicts? With a weird incest thing on the side. Anyway,
You gotta have that incest in there. Well,
yeah. So, pretty cool little movie that didn't get a lot of attention.
now was this
But
an independent film, American film, a studio film?
I'm thinking it was a studio film, but I couldn't tell you 100%.
But it's
Couldn't tell.
American.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an American production.
Okay. 1982. Interesting.
Yeah.
But low budget or
If it is, I don't know. It's pretty simple, pretty minimalist. If it's low budget, I mean, you can't tell the production value is pretty good. It's got good atmosphere.
cool.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Very cool. Very cool. I don't think I'd heard the name and that's it. So this room, is it really like painted black? Like
Yes.
all walls and ceiling and floor.
Yeah, but very well decorated. It's really nice, and they always have a boom box where they're pumping in classical music all the time. Nice decor. They've always got a bottle of wine open, which is usually drugged, and yeah,
Fascinating.
just tailor made for all your kinky needs, and then when you're done satisfying their kinky needs, you may become a blood donor.
What? How do you see this movie?
How do I see it?
Yeah. How do you view it? How does a person view it?
It doesn't seem to be up much of anywhere, but it's on YouTube.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Thankfully, it's on YouTube because I'm not sure whether we actually have a copy.
Is it not
We
on
might.
on Blu-ray? Do you know?
It might. I don't know. I think we have a bootleg
Okay.
somewhere.
Cool. All right. Groovy. Well, that was awesome, Chuck. Have any of y'all seen this movie besides Mr. Roberts? We're in Mr. Roberts' neighborhood. And so, okay,
Can you
well,
say that? Nice try.
I haven't seen it.
I was thinking of Eddie Murphy, not that other guy.
Oh,
But
I
even
do
better.
notice there seems to be a trend these days with vampire films that the vampire is not restricted to nighttime only, and that they can walk around during daylight as well, as long as there's shade, some sort of shade.
yeah, but
So
this
that
was
they can,
1982, so that was more
oh,
rare then. But you're right, it
Yeah,
is
that
yeah,
was
common now.
that kind of lore I think was added in the movies though. I think if you read Bram Stoker's book, I think
yeah, yeah.
Dracula Dracula does kind of run around in
Yeah,
the daylight. He
does.
just doesn't do it a lot.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what was confusing about the Coppola movie when I saw it in the theater.
Which one was that? Was the one with
Gary Oldman.
Keanu.
Gary Oldman? Yes.
And I don't know
I
if
think I really enjoyed the
Winona was good.
The
Mhm.
costumes are gorgeous.
yeah,
Yes.
it's very lavish sets and whatnot, but
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think
Now,
I think I really just like the Tom Waits Dr. Seuss
It was
character
good.
version of Renfield.
He
It
was
was
great. Yeah.
And then
I
Sadie
think
Frost played Lucy.
yes.
Sadie Frost played the Lucy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I don't know what's
Great costume for hers, too.
Oh yeah. The costumes are great.
Yeah.
I did
How
like
about
the fact that he
costumes?
where it's like the book is that he carved the walls in the beginning, and also that he gradually became younger. Though that wasn't the first movie to do that. The first movie to do that was Conde Dracula by Jess Franco with
Yes,
Christopher Lee.
yes,
Dan Curtis's
yeah.
Dracula with Jack Palance as Dracula.
Well, you notice the parallel there. Both that and Coppola's version were both by Dan Curtis. I think that script was originally taken to Coppola, and I don't know if a rewrite may have happened after that, but
You mean in the
yeah,
70s?
yes, the one in the set. I don't know if it's the '70s script. He may have rewritten
Richard
it,
Matheson
but,
wrote the script in the 70s.
okay.
Matheson
Well,
was hot.
Dan Curtis produced the movie as well.
He also directed the 70s one, yeah.
Yeah,
He had
and
been doing Dark. Well, that's the same time frame. I guess he had just
Dark
finished up
Shadows.
Dark Shadows. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
But I think Dan Curtis is the connected thread between those two movies.
Oh, okay. I did not know that. Yeah, I would need to watch it again, just kind of on its own terms. I was kind of
Yeah.
a purist, a Dracula purist, when I saw it, and I was really disappointed at how it really was not any more faithful than almost any
The
of the.
novel's amazing. I like the way it's in a diary format.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Starting
found
out.
document, like a lot of
Yeah.
novels used to be.
But
There was also an
Keanu was quite
adaptation.
wooden.
What'd you say, Bree?
Oh no, I was going to say there was also a adaptation with Franklin Jella. Did you guys see that Dracula as
Yeah.
well?
Oh,
didn't
that's
like that one.
beautiful.
Wasn't
That
that
was
I mean, I didn't say it was a bad
1979,
movie.
right?
It was not a good
Mhm.
adaptation, though. It really
Mhm,
wasn't.
mhm. I thought Franklin Jella as Dracula was good. I
Sterling Jail's a good
stumbled,
actor.
yeah, I stumbled upon that, and I thought that was really I thought it was
It was huge when it came out.
well
Yeah.
done. Yeah.
It had been a play, and then they did a movie by John Badham. I wanted to go see it in the theater, but as with many movies back then, because we grew up kind of poor, my mom
Okay.
they were very selective. It basically had to be a movie that, one or both.
Everybody wanted to see?
Yeah, man, one or both of my parents had to also be interested in it. It couldn't just me be me.
So
So
you didn't want to see like Herbie the Love Bug or something like that?
I did want to see Harvey the Love Bug, but
Did you want to see
that
Herbie the
didn't
Love
pass the
Bug?
parent test though either.
Okay.
So yeah, today I'm going to talk about a movie, um, and by all means, anybody here chime in who has seen this film. So I'm going to talk about this film now this one I had to actually use some cheat notes because I was still learning the minutia of it. Uh, Richard Wink directed it. Recently, he's gotten kind of big doing the Equalizer remake films with Denzel Washington, which I have seen parts of the first two, and they're way above average for a Hollywood action movie currently. Richard Wink is the director, and this film is called Vamp from 1986. So I recently reviewed on this channel for Zombies Night of the Comet from 1984. Very 80s movie in a good way. Vamp is right up that same alleyway. Very, very 80s. Uh, I don't particularly find it to be dated though, maybe because I grew up in the 80s. Vamp is uh, very much of its day. It's kind of bathed in this turquoise and hot pink and muted red colors. The cinematography is very similar to Mario Bava's, who was doing this in the early 1960s. So he was the 80s before there was an 80s as far as cinematography and lighting. Um, but this kind of candy colored lighting wasn't super common in the 80s. It's gradually become more common in recent years. For instance, the Terrifier films use the same palette, and I think they pretty much acknowledge that they're fans of Mario Bava, but they're probably also fans of Vamp. There was a movie called Vamps that came out much later, which is kind of a ripoff of this movie, but from what I understand, it's inferior. But I have not seen it. But Vamp is the template for From Dusk Till Dawn. Reading about Vamp on Wikipedia, it's like if you read that first, you probably wouldn't even bother to see the movie. Um, they got a lot of facts wrong, and they really, really stressed how many negative reviews it had because uh, something that Mark Baranowski, one of our co-hosts, recently talked about on the show. I don't remember if it made its way into the final cuts, but we spent a little time debunking the legitimacy of Rotten Tomatoes. Um, I feel like people use that as a barometer, and again, it's like the loudest haters who can get published the fastest, and on the internet, that's not hard to do. They can outweigh the people who there may be fewer of them, but they're passionate, and Rotten Tomatoes kills the whole idea of cult movies because
It's
cult,
like the Yelp equivalent of movie reviews.
I think context is important, and that's something that's very important to us on this channel, context and the depth of a work and your own personal passion for it. Um, and those are things that Rotten Tomatoes tends to gloss over. And sadly, outlets like Wikipedia, who are supposed to be objective facts wise, they really aren't as objective as you'd like them to be a lot of times. But to make a long story short, Vamp is in my opinion a great movie. I did not see it in its day. I saw it I think on YouTube a few years ago, and I thought, well, this is a lot better than I've ever heard it being. Um, but it didn't stick with me. Now, about 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't remember the circumstances, but I remember the experience, the sensory experience. I got very high and a little bit drunk, and I watched Vamp on one of the streaming channels. I just threw it on. And man, I was like, this is fucking awesome. And I just like fell in love with it. So last week I was like, hey, I'd like to see this again. Maybe I can talk about it on the show. We're having Vampires coming up. So I watched it and I was pretty riveted from beginning to end. It's very entertaining. And so I went ahead and once again ordered it from Amazon because they have it super, super dirt cheap for an Arrow Blu-ray because it's packed with extras. And I just got it today, but I'd watched it the other day. So I haven't watched my Blu-ray yet. I did sample the print and it's amazing. Um, the cinematography is incredible. And this guy who shot it, I forgot his name. I'll tell you here in a sec. But he had never been a DP before. He had been like a camera operator. His name was Elliot Davis. Um, he's since gone to on to do some well-known films. Ironically, probably his most well-known film he's done is Twilight, his only other vampire movie, but many years later. Um, but don't let that turn you off. There's nothing like Twilight. So this one actually does hew very closely to vampire lore and the kind of Bram Stoker novel kind of basic stuff of how you kill a vampire, how you become a vampire, you know. And I used to really love that. Used to be my main criteria for enjoying vampire movies. Now I'm a bit more open-minded now, but I still appreciate it when someone does that well and is internally consistent within the story, the internal logic. So this story has a lot of that. It reminds me, I would say as far as the vibe of it, I would pitch it somewhere among Light of the Comet, like I said, and also Fright Night, same period, and also about vampires. Night of the Comet's about zombies, and also Return of the Living Dead, also about zombies, which we also just covered on this channel. So we're just having a massive '80s fest here. Um, but it really is of that time where horror comedies were kind of coming into vogue, and there were a lot of them, and most of them were bad. But yeah, so Vamp is it is definitely the template from Dusk Till Dawn. That was kind of a roundabout way of getting back to that. Uh, where I got on the Wikipedia detour is Wikipedia is very dubious of this. It's like many people argue that this is like from Dusk Till Dawn. And then they name all the differences, and they give the similarities like about 4 or 5 words, and then all the differences are like a dense paragraph. And I'm like, you're kind of missing the point. It did it first. You know, that counts for something to some people. You know, there was
Mhm.
not a movie about strippers and vampires and the tone of the movie changing into the strippers turning into vampires halfway through the movie. You know, this was 8 years before, well, 7 years before From Dusk Till Dawn was even written. Yeah, so this movie, instead of two psychotic hitmen like in From Dusk Till Dawn, it is two guys though, very different temperament, very 80s kind of characters. They're college students, and the movie kind of does a bait and switch in the beginning. You think it's going to be some gothic horror or monk exploitation or nun exploitation, but it's actually a fraternity hazing, and basically the two guys are best friends, and they end up feeling, as we the audience does pretty quickly, that the hazing is lame, it's stupid, and that point is kind of smashed across to you. So if you don't agree with it, you probably won't like this movie either, because they come back to it quite a few times about how stupid and banal jocks in college are. So basically, they embarrass these guys. The kind of faster talker of the two friends, his name is AJ, played by Robert Rusler. Now, Robert Rusler, I don't know really anything about him. Um, the star of the movie is Chris Makepeace, who retired from acting some years back. He does appear on the extras on the Blu-ray. I did watch a little of that, and he was really cool. He's like, movies are like your children. So even though I don't do acting, you know, Vamp is one of my children, and it was painful to make. So sometimes that's your favorite child. So I'm back for this Blu-ray. And I was like, you go, man. And I'm not familiar with his oeuvre either. I did know his name, but I'm not familiar. But this is not a star-studded cast. It was one major exception. We'll get to that in a second. It's unavoidable, and that's what makes the movie so good to watch when you're high, I think, especially when you see this character performing. And they never say a single word, yet they are the star, undisputed, of the whole movie. But other than this character, our buddy Keith, played by Chris Makepeace, he's kind of dressed like a college Joe. He's got like the team jacket and everything. These guys are probably supposed to be about 19 or 20, but he's kind of shy. He's kind of awkward. He's kind of cautious. He's kind of timid in his way. Whereas AJ is like outgoing, and he's kind of a hustler, and he always like makes these deals with people. So he tells the fraternity that, hey man, you guys are fucking lame, you suck, but we're gonna do you a favor and join your pitiful fraternity. And they're like, what do you mean do us a favor? Like, we'll do anything you want tonight for your fraternity if you just let us in without this hazing crap. So they're like, okay, we want a stripper. And of course, Keith is like, this is not going to work, dude. And AJ's like, of course it will, man. He's like, why did you have to say anything? Why don't you say something or a thing? And so they go and they find this buddy, Duncan, played by this Japanese American actor named Getty Watanabe, who is kind of like a gay Asian version of Paul Rubens. He reminds me so much of Paul Rubens, his shtick, his slick back hair. But he's like Paul Rubens, who are Asian and a little more overtly gay. And he's ridiculous. I think he was a comedian in real life, and he said they approached him. They wanted him to play this character, Duncan. I don't know if Duncan was written on paper as an Asian American. It's one of those parts that didn't really matter. Um, but he said they came to him, and that's the only time that it ever happened. Somebody actually said, "Hey, we want you to be in the movie. You don't have to audition." And so he was like, I kind of wish I had auditioned because then I would have known how hard the movie was going to be, and I probably wouldn't have done it because it was crazy. And but he's hilarious. He's a little annoying, but once you kind of get used to him, he's a sweet character. And he's basically the guy that people go to on campus to get rides places who don't drive or who don't have their own car. Or usually he'll do like, you know, pro bono, well, not pro bono, but prorated like taxi services. But these are guys who are like, no, we want this as a favor. And he's like, well, okay, but can you be my best friends? They're like, He's like, how about it for a week? Pretend to be my friends. And they're like, all right. So the three of them go driving off, and they're researching. This is before you had the internet in your phone or internet at all. But they're looking in the newspaper, and they find the After Dark strip club. So they go to the bad part of town, just as it's starting to, the sun is going low. As Black Widow would say in the Marvel movies, the sun's getting low, big guy. So they get into this little town and part of town. This kind of off the beaten track. And people are kind of staring at them, and they don't really know what's going on. So the time they get to this place, first of all, they stop at a diner on the way, right when they're almost there. They stop at a diner, and these three guys start harassing them, led by Billy Drago, playing Billy Drago. Or as he puts it himself, I'm good at playing bad guys because I'm playing me, I'm bad. However, interpret that however you want it. And of course, he says in that crazy voice you got, And so his character is basically Billy Drago, but he's called Snow. And he's got this kind of blonde hair like Billy Drago, but it's white. It's like platinum blonde. He's very punk rock looking. Now, this movie came out a year before The Lost Boys. But this is the twist. If you go into this movie knowing it's a vampire movie, you think, well, Billy Drago and these two folks with him are vampires. And they're like the Lost Boys. They're like these punk vampires. So he's with these two women. And once this black girl who starts flirting with, or seemingly flirting with our man Keith, the more mellow guy. And, she's basically, orally copulating this straw. It's like a candy straw that she had in her cocktail. And he's like really into it because she keeps looking at him. But then she opens her mouth and she's got this giant buck teeth. And so with all this circumstantial evidence, I thought, well, they're vampires. But actually, they're not vampires. They're just three awkward, weird punk new wave gang members. So Drago starts threatening them. His name's Snow, his character, because he's an albino. Get it? So, and a lot of vampires have had names like that, like Deacon Frost from Blade. But so I just assumed Snow was a vampire too. So they don't make it clear initially they're not vampires, but they do threaten to kick the ass of these two dudes. And so AJ gets up and I think he throws a hot coffee in the face of this poor girl who was flirting with Keith. And that's enough of a distraction that he manages to literally grab Snow by the balls. And he doesn't care if it looks gay or not. He's crushing them. That's another hint that they're not really vampires because he actually was hurting from having his balls crushed. Meanwhile, Duncan's in the bathroom and he's terrified, so he's staying in the bathroom pretending he's repairing it. And then they split. They get out of there fast while the three cats are on the floor in different kinds of pain. And Duncan's like, I want to go back in. I want to show them how macho I am, and I want to grab those girls. And they're like, dude, come on. And he's like that. He's a bragger. He's a liar, but he's kind of affable. I think the reason, this is just a theory, but I think he is part of a very, very tiny trope in the 80s of Asian male supporting characters who were kind of the comic relief but we're not like vulgarly stereotypic like previous generations. The best example I have is Dennis Dune in Big Trouble in Little China. Um, and if you know about that movie, like really know about it, you'll know that Dennis Dune actually is the main character and intended hero of that movie. But because he's an
Yeah.
Asian, Carpenter knows that, well, I mean, and it's based loosely on an Asian film, a Chinese film, Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain, which is an amazing film. I finally saw it for the first time last month after 35 years of trying to find it. It just came out on Blu-ray. But in Big Trouble, Jack Burton, played by Kurt Russell, is not the hero. He's like an affable, muscle-bound idiot, and that's why he keeps fucking everything up. But he's funny, and he's
Yeah.
Kurt Russell, so you expect him to be the hero after seeing The Thing and Escape from New York. But actually, Dennis Dune's the hero, and Dennis Dune went on to do another great role like that in Prince of Darkness with Carpenter, just hilarious. So this guy is kind of along those general lines. He's not as sharp or smart or cool as Dennis Dune, or good looking or good an actor, but he functions as this kind of type. And they don't. I don't know they other than his. Yeah, I don't think they ever mentioned that he's Asian American. Just like totally incidental. This was a dead back in the day when that was a big hang up for people. Whereas now it's kind of not a big hang up. So these cats finally make their way to the strip bar after dark, and they see a few strippers, and this one chick seems to know Keith, and her name is Amaretto, and she's a very attractive blonde girl. She's actually by far the most attractive woman in the strip bar. She's like a cocktail waitress, and apparently she strips, but not on that particular night. She's just serving drinks, so you never actually see her strip. And she's the only woman that I wanted to see strip, and she doesn't strip. All the women who do strip are like, they're built like this. They're all very white women. They're very skinny and flat all over. A little bit of silicone tossed in, a lot of hairspray and bleach. Now this chick does have a lot of hairspray and bleach, and she's slim, but she is curvy and she's funny and she's very attractive. And the actress name is Dee Dee Pfeiffer. I had heard of her, but I don't really know anything about her. She's amazing in this, hilarious and very sexy and likable. And so she's flirting with Keith, and she's like, "I know you. Don't you remember me?" And he doesn't know who she is. He thinks she's bullshitting him. Meanwhile, AJ, he's trying to recruit one of these strippers to go and fulfill their obligation to the frat house. So everything comes to a standstill when Grace Jones enters the movie. Now, her character's named Katrina. Now, Katrina, we later learn, used to owns the bar, owns the building, but she didn't always. Um, Grace Jones doesn't speak a line of dialogue in this movie, but she's absolutely magnetic. And this was definitely her era. And to really throw you off and just show how unique and beautiful she is, regardless of what you're used to seeing her as during that time period, like from Conan and all these other movies. Um, she's in all white makeup, like, you know, perfect. Like when I say white, I don't mean flesh color. I mean like chalk white, like an albino. And her hair is dyed this blood red color appropriately. And she does this crazy strip tease. You don't even see her nipples. But the only parts of her body you don't see are her nipples and her labia. You see everything else. And she's slim, but she's also muscular and toned. But she wears this incredible weird armor outfit, like kind of like Red Sonja, and she's got all these tattoos and makeup all over. Well, they're not really tattoos, they're makeup with these different designs. Now, those are all done in white and outlined with that chalk white color. But once she starts disrobing, you see that they're interlaced with her actual skin color, which is black. So only her face is like all white. Now, if you didn't know who she was, you might think, well, it's the other way around. It's a white actress with a white face with some brown lines, but it's the other way around. So everything about her character is just totally magnetic. She's another person in the 80s I did not get at the time at all. I didn't get her whatsoever. I was totally ignorant. So now I think she's just pretty iconic, though, I have to say. So she's just crazy. I mean, her dance is great. She didn't do any of the music for the movie, but this guy who did the soundtrack, he was somebody I wasn't real familiar with either. But he's done a number of scores, and I think this was his first score. Was this cat named Jonathan Elias? Now it's very 80s, very, very synth heavy, drum machines, but cool melodies, wonky guitar solos. It's just that whole mood, and her striptease to it is just amazing. So everybody in the bar is quiet. And so for like 10 seconds, nobody says anything. There's no music, there's no dialogue. Everybody's just like that. Finally one guy starts clapping and everybody goes crazy. So AJ's like, that's our girl. And that's another thing I liked about this is AJ, unlike a lot of real life white frat boys in 1986, is not a racist. He thinks she's the hottest woman in there. So that was also very refreshing. And so much so that not only does he want to get her to be the stripper, but he wants to get with her. And she starts kind of touching him, and the way she's touching him and licking him all over you, I guess I would probably think she wanted to get with me too, but he's wrong. She wants to victimize him, and that's when you learn she's a vampire, though they don't really say the word vampire for quite a while later. But it's just a movie that doesn't spell everything out, also refreshing for movies back then. There's not like this exposition. There's a little exposition towards the end, fills in some of it, but a lot of it's your imagination, and you just have to know about vampires. And if you know about vampires, you'll add it all together. They don't go, oh no, we got to do this to kill the vampires. They do work all that in a later scene pretty brilliantly, though. I'll get to that. So Katrina vampirizes AJ, and it's pretty gross. She basically rips his whole throat open, and she kind of does what later would be called a game face. That was coined from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, when the vampire goes like feral and they're like feeding mode, and their face gets all distorted, and they have all this crazy makeup like something out of Star Trek, and they have these giant fangs. So that wasn't really used much back then either. But her character definitely has a regular face, just like Grace Jones, with or without the makeup, because you see her both ways. And then her with the giant fangs and the distorted facial features. And she's just like a savage animal. And she tears him apart, and they just wheel his body out and dump him in the dumpster. So you're like, damn, the movie's not even halfway over, and our main guy who's doing most of the talking is like gone. So
Mm.
he's not, well, he is dead, but he's not gone from the story, because this is a movie about undead characters. So you can't depend on Duncan, the Asian guy, because he's the comic relief. So the unlikely hero ends up becoming Keith, who is the top billed actor in the movie. And now I understood why, because I was like, so it's really about him coming into his own. He's just an ordinary dude who gets caught in these insane, extraordinary circumstances. And within about an hour and a half of almost real time, he becomes a vampire killer, and a survivor. And there's a lot of humor in it, but there's also moments where it gets serious. And when they decide to bring, there's like this mix up where they thought AJ was by himself, because they basically prey on derelicts and homeless people and prostitutes. So it turns out that yes, all the strippers except Amaretto are all vampires, and most of the staff is either all the staff is either vampires or familiars of vampires. The clientele, a few are vampires, most are not though, but they're going to become meals. And they thought AJ came by himself, but then they realized, oh god, he came with these other two dorky guys. And so Katrina's very angry. Again, she never says a word of dialogue, but she just conveys everything. And then she has other characters, of course, who kind of do the exposition, who kind of know her character and kind of know that she's mad and know why she's mad. And they at some point they show her coffin, which is like an Egyptian pharaoh, and they kind of broadly hint that she's probably thousands of years old. She's kind of like an Anne Rice character years before the movie Interview with the Vampire came out, but years after the novel did. Um, and it reminded me of that kind of lore, because Dracula is not very old. Dracula is only like 500 years old, but Anne Rice started having these vampires that are way, way, way older than that. Um, so yeah, poor AJ. So they bring him back from the dumpster, and they decide they're going to put him to work to lure the other two out and to kill them and just get it all swept under the rug. So AJ is a vampire, but he doesn't want to be a vampire. He does try to fight it, and that's when he starts giving the kind of exposition like, this is how you destroy them. They gave me a list. It's right here in my pocket. There's lots of these silly jokes they're throwing. And he tells them about fire. Fire can destroy them, which that varies from vampire, from movie to movie, book to book, text to text. Some say fire destroys them. Some say fire doesn't really do anything to them. Maybe dries them out a little bit. Um, but in this movie, that's a way to kill them, and it's really the only way they can successfully kill them because they can't fight, they don't really know anything, and so he tells them, "I want you to kill me." And they have kind of a touching scene where he's like, I love you, man, but right now you're just food to me. Your lunch is coursing, my lunch is coursing through your veins, bro. He doesn't say bro, but if it were nowadays, he would say bro because they're kind of like that, kind of buddies. And so he tears off this what looks like a piece of wood off of this some table or something, and he says, "Just stake me," and he makes him stake him because Keith isn't going to do it. He's going to actually lay his life down. That's when the movie finally gets kind of serious because he's like, "You really would sacrifice your life for me." So they've been friends since they were like little kids. They basically let you know, and so yeah, he seemingly does kill him. I say seemingly. So the next on Keith's agenda is get the hell out of there. And by this time, he is pretty sure that Amaretta, who claims to know him and AJ, uh, is worth saving, and she's not a vampire. He's not 100% sure she's not a vampire, so he keeps testing her periodically. But she claims to not be a vampire. So he takes her, they grab Duncan, they get the hell out of there. Duncan's been drinking this whole time while they've been doing stuff and giving money to all the strippers and everything. And the three of them get away and they're chased by this weird bouncer guy named Vlad, who is he's a vampire. The main guy who runs the club, uh, he's played by kind of an older comedian who I recognized, but I didn't know his name. I don't know if anyone would know his name, but I think he's named Sandy Barron, and apparently now he's famous for doing Seinfeld. That's what most people know most of these actors from. It's like they were on Seinfeld one time, and then they're suddenly now famous. Um, and that's really kind of sucks if that's all you're known for. So Sandy Barron, he's a trip, and he used to be the owner of this club. So he's been alive for like almost 100 years, and he's not quite a full vampire. He's like a familiar who occasionally will drink the blood of Katrina to keep him alive and to keep him enslaved. And so he does their dirty work and he runs the club. Now he says way back in the day when he ran the club, he had Louis Prima and he names all these like old school big band and jazz guys from like the 30s and 40s. So, this is 40, 50 years on. Basically, these guys decide to feign surrender, and uh, Keith just starts smashing all the wine bottles and wine glasses, and he's got a lighter. So he decides, well, this is the most expedient way to kill them. And they kind of walk right into it because they're not really that smart, the vampires, I have to say. Um, but so he starts burning the place and all of them down. And our guy played by Sandy Barron, he goes to the I think his name's Vic. Vic goes to the dressing room and he tells Vlad, well, I'm gonna have a drink. I haven't had an actual drink in 75 years. Other blood, I guess. So that seems to be the end of it, and they manage to narrowly get out. And then it becomes kind of this chase through the sewers, and along the way, like the punk gang led by Billy Drago finds them again, and that's when you realize they're not vampires. And there's this little girl. I told you this movie was very influenced by Mario Bava. There's this female character who's suspiciously like the villain in Kill Baby Kill. This little girl giggling, which since this movie came out, a lot of other people have taken that. Notably, Martin Scorsese took that character and used her as the devil in Last Temptation of Christ. But basically, this little girl that Keith thinks he's going to help them. He's like, little girl, and basically she just jumps on these people, and these big fangs come out, and her jumping is like terrible. All the effects are really good, but her jumping on the people looks really silly, but that's kind of cool though. I mean, it's funny. Like I don't know how they did this thing with the wire, just because it was pre CGI, so it's very awkward looking, and it's like some drunken cat is jumping on your face. It's like so ridiculous. And so I kind of saw that coming a mile away that since she looked like that character in Kill Baby Kill, I'm like, she has to be a vampire. And obviously another thing that was influenced by Anne Rice, like Claudia in Interview with a Vampire. So yeah, the punk gang gets done in by the real vampires, and unfortunately, their buddy Duncan, while he was fucking around in the place, someone bit him because he starts to become a vampire, and he's super drunk and he thinks everything's a joke anyway. So like he's like, I'm really thirsty, and then they look at him, he's starting to get kind of giant fangs. And he's like, I don't feel good. They don't give him the benefit of the doubt. They crash the car and they let it catch on fire. And right before he blows up, he's like, "Guys, where are you going?" So he's still like the comedy relief. So it's kind of cruel, but whatever. Finally, Katrina finds them, and we kind of saw that coming. They do manage to find their coffins of most of the vampires, and they, of course, torch the sewers. This is all underground. And but Katrina finds them, and by this time they've raided this uh pawn shop, and he's gotten like a bow and an arrow, and basically he's killing them. He took archery and as an elective, so luckily, right, that's the only skill he has at all. And but it's good because then he knows to shoot the arrow like right through their heart, so the wood goes into their heart, not so much the point. And so he does dispatch a few vampires, and he even tests out Amaretta, real name Allison, who finally reveals she knew him from the fifth grade. They made out together, and he's like, oh. But so he kind of tests her, like aiming the arrow at her, and it turns out he's shooting a vampire behind her. But there's a kind of a weird shot at a weird tilted angle that goes by really fast. That if you watch it and don't really pause it or look at it, it seems to show that she's not reflected in the mirror of the pawn shop. So I just from then on assumed she was a vampire, but then they finally by the end she's not a vampire. And he tests her a few more times, and they fight Katrina till the sun starts to peer through the top of the slats of wood above the sewer, and he just, of course, breaks them, and the sun comes through, and he roots her to the spot, and then she dies, and because he already shot arrow through her mouth, and uh, Allison jammed a pipe into her heart, but those don't kill vampires. So the sun got her. So that's about the movie. No, yeah, that seems to be the end of the movie. But yeah, Vlad comes back to kill him, and then he's like, "Honey, I want you to see something," and he opens the mantle cover, and it's sunlight, and she doesn't disintegrate. So they start making out. But who saves them from Vlad is AJ. So he didn't die, and they're like, "What the hell?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, it was for Micah. It wasn't wood." And so uh at that point the whole stakes of the scene they had together kind of evaporate, in the sense of, I mean, in a way it's kind of lame and anticlimactic, but in a way it's kind of like shows how bonded they are, because he's like, I want to follow you guys home. And they're like, well, we're coming out here. We're walking down the street. He's like, I'm under here. I'm walking below you. I can hear you. Cause obviously his human senses. And he's like, maybe I can go to night school. Maybe we can work something out where I can live with you guys. And that's kind of how it ends. And one of the synopsis said that, you know, it's like, yeah, the implication is that they stay friends and this is what happened. And I mean, I guess that's wishful thinking, and you want to kind of see it that way because you want to have some kind of happy ending. But I like the fact that Keith came into his own, and you finally found out Allison's not a vampire, and
Fun.
they finally smooch, and it's cute. So it was great. Have any of y'all seen this movie, Vamp?
No,
Really?
I have not. No, I haven't seen that.
Have you seen it, Chuck?
I have not
No,
seen it.
I think Mondo Heather probably has, but I have not.
Justin?
Well, I haven't seen it, but I have seen From Dusk Till Dawn, and it does sound, as you said before, like a blueprint for that film.
Yeah, yeah. The difference
Yeah.
is the two white guys, are not brothers, and they're likable.
Yeah, I didn't
Mhm.
like From Dusk Till Dawn very much, actually. No, I
No, I
don't
think
think you.
that character Tarantino wrote for himself is one of the sleaziest characters probably the sleaziest character he's ever written. So of course, I don't know if y'all know this about Tarantino, but you may have read it or gleaned it, but he believes himself to be a brilliant actor. Uh, He said this many
Uh,
times before.
He's not.
And so naturally, he's like, I wrote this really edgy character for me, man. I raped an old lady and killed her in the hotel, and you just feel the edge just kind of like it's cutting you, just like watching the movie, you're bleeding, it's so edgy. And these characters
Well,
are actually likable.
Cocaine, because you really are a genius.
Might convince anybody. Francis, have you seen this movie, Vamp, being a
Nope,
vampire
not at all.
expert?
Not heard of it. Yeah, believe it or not, not heard of it. And
Well,
you
I
said it
always
was 1984?
86. Most people know it
86.
from
Okay.
Grace Jones because really she's the only star in it.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
Sandy Barron was a comedian and a character actor, but none of the other people really did anything after this, and most of them even retired from acting.
Around that time, Grace Jones was in a few films because she was a Bond villain in was it A View to a Kill?
Yeah,
I think
with
so.
Duran Duran music. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was good in that. Yeah.
She was in
Didn't say
the
much, but
Conan sequel, Conan the Destroyer.
yeah,
Um,
and great music as well.
yeah, and in real life, she
Possibly
dated
love it.
Dolph Lundgren, so apparently her taste
Mhm.
kind of ran to the barbarian side of the spectrum in real life. And I've read some wild things about their relationship that I probably can't share here or we'll get demonetized. But
Oh.
they're all pretty triple X rated. But
This is on YouTube.
what?
This is on YouTube, this movie.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Tubi.
It probably
think
is.
Tubi. Okay.
Yeah, it's on
Okay.
Tubi. It is free for those who want to do the
Okay,
ad
good.
thing.
I'll look for it.
Or you can do it on your laptop and do your ad blocker. So we're going to wrap up this episode and then we're going to be back with another vampiric verse here in a little bit. So stay
But
tuned.
before we go,
Yep.
like, subscribe, ring that little bell for the notifications,
Mhm.
get in touch with us. Comment in the comment section, do all that crazy stuff.
Let us know how you feel and let us
Mhm.
know who's your favorite. But we all know who that is.
Briggy
Just
actually does have
joking.
fans. I don't have any
Just
yet
joking.
that I'm aware
Do
of.
I have fans? I had no idea.
Yeah, there is somebody a couple people have told me they quite like you.
Oh.
So yes, we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you for watching. Good night.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.